So I have this like kind of clever integrated strategy I've designed where I'm going to basically do blogging on my own blog and Psychology Today, and kind of double dip in that
And
way.
you can double put. Could you post
exactly.
what you put?
Dude, you know what? Casinos? It's a fucking crazy business model. The casino's probably the most brutally exploitative business model ever, if you think about it.
How so?
Well, I mean, think about it. You just make these games where you're statistically programmed to win, and then you allow people to come in and play them, and you pretty much just seduce them with flashy lights, and you're just statistically certain to win.
Yeah.
And if a few people come in who are really smart and they know how to play the game really well, like people who count cards in blackjack, as soon as they start winning more than like an hour, you just literally kick them out, and you're allowed to.
Yeah.
Just think about that, man.
I just remember in like high school psych class learning about some study done on rats where like basically if whatever the reward was in their box, if it came out every time, they got less interested. If it came out at regular intervals, it still wasn't that great. If it came out at random times,
Very good.
but often enough,
Yeah.
that was when they were going to be like most engaged in whatever the activity was.
This is the randomized reward schedule. It's
Okay,
the
that's what it's
optimal one.
called.
That's right. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
But yeah, I just remembered like learning it very.
But I feel like for humans, it's like a
Yeah.
nuanced like interplay where there's actual like seems to be coherent reasons for payout.
Well, we can do crazy things like show people commercials of other
Like-
people winning
like a
silly
human
amounts of
wouldn't
money,
actually,
or
like,
like
a random number.
Like they can like we can like the idea that we might get the big payoff can be reinforced in so many more creative
I'm
ways
saying
than
that
just
most
when it
people, like,
comes once in a while.
would want the payout that comes from hard work and like a combination of luck and like discipline and stuff. Not
How
like,
people play lottery like a lot.
they also
Don't
build
a lot
careers
of
and
people,
stuff.
They do, yeah. It's not exclusive.
Right.
But then there's like
What are all those screens? Are those betting numbers
yeah.
for sports?
Yeah. I assume you can just
I kind of want to start betting on MMA fights because I'm pretty like. Deep
Are you into
into
that?
MMA. I'm
Yeah.
pretty deep into it. I mean, I would never start betting mad money, but for fun, for the fun of it, to make watching a little bit more exciting. Well, what I kind of want to do is build statistical models with the data and see if I can, like, I would never get like pipe dreams of making actual
I mean,
money. But
you're not into it, but some people I know who work at hedge funds, they are really into fantasy football. Like they take that shit seriously.
Yeah.
It's, they'll enter like 20 leagues and they'll have like diversified rosters across or betting, drafting strategies across, and like it's crazy how hard they go. But I'm just saying, like, maybe you can make money off that. I'm sure, like, probably a less efficient market than the market. So yeah. What's your day-to-day engagement with the statistics stuff? Like, is that something you use it to study whatever you're looking at on a regular basis, or is it something you break out for like perspective? How do you?
Yeah, both. I guess like some of the blog posts I wrote a couple years ago that got a lot of traction were data-driven.
I saw the New Yorker article that you were cited in where you were doing statistical work. Like
Well, but even like in the blogosphere, like the articles that got me some traction early on were mostly data-driven articles. So I want to keep that going. Those are some of my skills, and I also just have tons of data analyses kind of like half-baked on my hard drive. So one of my strategies for the next year is to make good on all of that data analysis that I've kind of half started, that I've lying around, and that I'm just like pretty good at. So it's a kind of obvious thing to work on and cultivate. I actually have a particular kind of like plan that's already kind of mapped out. I'm going to be doing a column for Psychology Today, and what's cool about their model, a lot of people don't know, they have a very interesting model where they do revenue sharing with authors. So if you get a blog on Psychology Today, and I don't think it's that hard to get a blog on Psychology Today, if you just like email them and you have some kind of like background that gives you some justification for writing on anything related to psychology, I think they're pretty open to it because it's cheap for them to bring on a new author. They just enter you in the system, and then you have your own little blog or column. I have this kind of, because what's cool about their model is they do revenue sharing, so you get paid by them directly for how many views you get, pretty much. And it's not great, it's not tons of money, but they're cool about you can repurpose stuff for other things also. So I have this like kind of clever integrated strategy I've designed where I'm going to basically do blogging on my own blog and Psychology Today, and kind of double dip in that
and
way.
you can double put. Could you post
Exactly.
what you put?
Yeah.
You could drive direct traffic to your blog.
They're cool with anything basically.
That's really
like
sweet,
I can
yeah.
post to my blog first and then repost it on there.
Yeah.
I could do it vice versa. So So what I'm gonna do is, as I mentioned before, I'm working on this. I have a book project that it's been in the work for a while. It's pretty much on, more or less, like, I won't call it this when it comes out because it's corny, but the easiest way to convey it is it's pretty much about the political psychology of social justice warriors, essentially. And I've been working on that for some time. As I was telling you before, I have a lot of personal anecdotes and I have some data analyses on this. I have a model of, I think, what's going on there that's unique. So I have planned out a series of blog posts for the next year, which are all data driven, and which will culminate, when I do them all, it will culminate into this like very data rich picture of various aspects of the psychology of social justice warriors. But each milestone along the way, I'll be posting it to my blog and also to Psychology Today, and I'll just see what happens. Yeah.
Cool. Are you going to trace that overall narrative for everyone along the way, or is it like just going to kind of create the story? Like,
no. Well, what I've learned.
Like, are you going to talk about political psychology of social justice warriors?
Yeah. I'll talk about those things, but I'll do it in an incremental way. You know, so like one thing that I've learned is, well, two things. One is, what works for a blog post is different than what works for like a longer project. It's sort of obvious when you think about it, but so you want to make blog posts kind of self-contained and valuable in their own self, right? But there's a way to plan a series of blog posts such that when you're done with like these 20 blog posts, you'll pretty much have all the hardcore material of a book. You just have to kind of edit and write and add transitions and kind of build out the structure a little bit more. But if you plan it in a clever way, you can plan like a whole series of blog posts that when you're, not only do you have blog content for like several months, but then when you're done, you pretty much have all the hard work of a book done. So that's kind of how I'm doing it. And I've like learned a lot of tricks along the way of how to kind of sequence and strategically order these different types of labors in a way that they get value out of the short term, like blogging and stuff like that, and then also valuable as a long-term product in the end when you put it all together. So I'm trying to kind of really get better at that, and I think that's one of my comparative advantages. Because not many people think like this, you know. People either are writing a book or they're building a blog, but these things are not so discretely separated anymore. And I think the more you can integrate these things as combined systems, I think the better you'll do.
Didn't Minch's Moldbug spin out a bunch of books?
I think those were done by fans. He might have had a hand in it. I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I'm not sure, but I think, like you can buy his books on Amazon. You can buy books of his blog posts. So yes, you're right. That's an example of kind of what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. If it's just a collection, then Paul Graham. Do you know Paul Graham?
Mm-hmm.
He did the same thing where he made a essay collection, which was his blog posts.
Great. Yeah. It's a good model. Yeah. So the short answer is yes. I definitely am planning on bringing my data scientific kind of skills more to the foreground over the next year or two. At the moment, I'm kind of just like building up the systems and preparing to use those skills for the maximum.
I guess what I was really trying to get to though is, I know you do a lot of data science, but work like that. But really, like, my question is, do you like thinking from that perspective as much or less or more than you do just like, well, I mean, however else you do your work, but like...
Yeah, I do. I like both. I really like both. For me, it's kind of bimodal. I like to either be thinking like crazy shit, freewheeling as much as I please, just thinking the most far out shit I can, completely disconnected from data, trying to be logical and trying to be rigorous and realistic and sophisticated, but not really holding myself to scientific testing. I like occupying that kind of radically free philosophical thought space. But then that gets tiring, honestly. It gets kind of boring, because when you can think anything you want, when there's no limits, you run out of steam. It gets boring. You want some kind of connection to reality. So pretty much like I'll get burned out just thinking like crazy philosophy shit, and then I'll want to go back to the data, and I'll want to reground myself, and then I really enjoy getting into the data and going back to my kind of mode like a political scientist, where, you know, as a social scientist, you have like one simple, really concrete idea, and then you spend almost all the time just testing it against the data to see if there's any support for it. And so it's like 90% of the work is trying to disprove your simple little concrete hypothesis, you know what I mean? So it's essentially the opposite of kind of radical philosophy. But I like both. What I don't like is the wishy-washy space between them. You know, I like either doing like crazy freewheeling philosophy or super rigorous, proper, scientifically sophisticated data analysis. I like either or, but I don't like the wishy-washy, like fake-ass social science, which is, or pretending to be empirically sophisticated, philosophy. Both of those two kind of wishy-washy zones, I think, are pretty shitty, personally. I mean, no disrespect to people who do that stuff.
No, yeah.
But like the soft social sciences, where people are pretty much like presenting social scientific arguments and social scientific models, but they're kind of just making up ideas and they're never testing it against the data. That's just kind of bullshit, because you're not really sure if you're right, but you're also not really having the fun and the creativity of true philosophy. So it's like either do one or the other, I think.